The wind howled fiercely that morning, carrying the scent of salt and desperation. I had been out on the water for hours, battling against the tide in my worn-out fishing boat, the Lucky Star, a name that felt more ironic than true most days. I was tired, cold, and ready to call it quits when something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, maybe a piece of driftwood tossed by the restless sea. But then I saw it again, something bobbing near the jagged rocks at the edge of the bay. I squinted against the glare of the rising sun, my pulse quickening. It wasn't driftwood. It was a child. Without thinking, I gunned the engine and steered toward her, my heart thundering in my chest. The waves crashed around us, and for a moment, I lost sight of her. "Please hold on," I whispered to no one in particular. As I drew closer, I saw her tiny hand weakly break through the surface of the water, and my stomach twisted in knots. She couldn't have been older than 7 or 8, her pale face barely visible above the waves. "Hang on," I shouted, leaning over the edge of my boat with a rope. The water was unforgiving, icy, and relentless. My hand slipped on the first try, but I gritted my teeth and tried again. This time, I caught her. With a strength I didn't know I had, I hauled her up and into the boat. She was soaked to the bone, trembling violently, her eyes fluttering open just long enough to whisper one word, "Mama." I didn't know who she was or how she had ended up in the middle of the bay, but none of that mattered right then. All I knew was that I had to get her warm and safe, fast. Wrapping her in the old blanket I kept for emergencies, I steered the Lucky Star back to shore, my heart heavy with questions. Who was this little girl? Where had she come from? But before I could piece anything together, I spotted a woman on the beach, her face a mix of panic and raw fear. She was running toward the water, her eyes locking onto the boat with desperate urgency. It was her mother. The moment my boat hit the shore, the woman waded into the icy surf without hesitation. Her hair clung to her tear-streaked face, and her voice cracked as she screamed, "My baby! Is she okay?" I barely had time to pull the little girl into my arms before the mother reached us, her trembling hands reaching for her child. "She's alive," I said, my voice hoarse from the adrenaline. "But she's cold. We need to get her warm." The woman collapsed to her knees in the shallow water, her arms cradling the girl as if letting go might make her disappear. She pressed her face to her daughter's forehead, murmuring words I couldn't make out. Relief and anguish poured out of her in equal measure, and for a moment, I couldn't look away. She glanced up at me then, her dark eyes wide with gratitude and something else. Shock, maybe? "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the waves. I gave her a stiff nod. "There's a fishing cabin up the hill," I said. "It's not much, but there's a stove and blankets. Let's get her there." The woman hesitated, looking at her daughter, then back at me. "I'll carry her," I offered, sensing her hesitation. Without waiting for her to agree, I scooped up the little girl, careful not to jostle her too much. She felt so light in my arms, like she could slip away if I wasn't careful. The mother followed close behind as I trudged up the narrow, rocky path toward the old cabin. I could hear her whispering softly to her daughter, her words thick with worry. When we finally reached the cabin, I kicked open the door and set the girl down on the worn-out sofa near the wood-burning stove. The mother dropped to her knees beside her, pulling the blanket tighter around her daughter's tiny frame. "Is she going to be okay?" she asked, her voice breaking. "She's breathing," I said, lighting the stove and placing a pot of water on top. "She needs to warm up, and then we'll see." "What happened out there?" The woman hesitated, her face pale. She glanced at the little girl, then back at me. "We were on a boat," she said, her voice trembling. "A small ferry to cross the bay. There was a storm. It happened so fast. The waves, the wind." She faltered, her eyes filling with tears. I lost my grip on her. She fell overboard and I couldn't reach her. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she buried her face in her hands. I thought I'd lost her forever. I sat back, the weight of her words settling over me. I couldn't imagine the terror she must have felt, the helplessness of watching her child disappear into the sea. "You're lucky I was out there," I said, more to myself than to her. She nodded, her hands still trembling as she smoothed her daughter's damp hair. Lucky doesn't even begin to cover it, she whispered. But there was something in her tone, something unsaid that made me look at her more closely. She wasn't dressed like most people around here. Her coat was sleek and expensive, her boots spotless even after the storm, and when she reached into her pocket for a tissue, a delicate gold bracelet slipped down her wrist, glinting in the dim light. She didn't belong here, that much was clear. "You're not from around here," I said cautiously. She shook her head, not meeting my eyes. "No," she admitted softly, "we're not." Before I could press her further, the little girl stirred, letting out a soft whimper. The mother's attention snapped back to her daughter, her hands fluttering over the child like a bird trying to shield its young. "Mama," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm here, baby," the woman said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here. You're safe now." The girl's eyes opened just a sliver, and for the first time, I saw them, big, green, and filled with a kind of fragile hope. She looked at me briefly before her gaze returned to her mother. "The man," she mumbled, her voice fading. "He saved me." Her mother looked at me then, her expression raw with gratitude. "You saved her," she said, her voice shaking. I shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable under her intense gaze. Anyone would have done the same. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The waters were rough, and the chances of spotting her had been slim. If I hadn't been there at that exact moment. "Thank you," the woman said again, her voice firmer this time. "You saved her life. I'll never forget this." I gave a small nod, but the unease in my chest lingered. Something about this woman, her story, didn't quite add up. And then, just as the girl drifted back into an uneasy sleep, the mother whispered, "We can't stay here. They'll find us." Her words hung heavy in the air, cutting through the warmth of the small cabin like a cold wind. "They'll find us." My gut tightened. "Who's going to find you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though my mind was already racing. The woman hesitated, biting her lip as she glanced down at her daughter. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine. "We've been running," she said quietly, "for months now, from people who won't stop until they get what they want." "And what exactly do they want?" I asked. Her eyes darkened. "Not what, who," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She stroked her daughter's cheek gently, her fingers trembling. "They want her." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with tension. My mind was swimming with questions, each one more urgent than the last. "Why?" I pressed. "Who are they?" The woman glanced at the door as if expecting someone to burst through it at any moment. I can't tell you everything," she said, her voice trembling. "It's safer that way, for you and for her. But please, you have to believe me. We're in danger. Serious danger." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "You're asking a lot without giving me much to go on," I said cautiously. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Her eyes filled with desperation. "Because I've got nowhere else to go," she said. "You saved her life. I didn't plan on dragging you into this, but now that you are, I'm begging you, help us." I looked at the little girl, her tiny body curled up on the sofa, her breathing steady but weak. Something inside me twisted. Whatever trouble they were in, it wasn't her fault. And something about the mother, her raw fear, her fierce protectiveness, felt painfully real. "Okay," I said finally. "You can stay here for now, but you're going to have to tell me more. At least enough to figure out how to keep you safe." The woman's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," she said softly. I nodded toward the stove. "The cabin's not much, but it'll keep you warm and dry. You'll be safe for a little while." She glanced out the window, her eyes scanning the woods beyond as if she still wasn't convinced. "Safe for now," she murmured. I started stoking the fire, trying to shake the uneasy feeling settling in my chest. But before I could say anything else, there was a sudden noise outside, a faint crunch of footsteps on the frozen ground. The woman froze, her eyes wide with panic. "Did you hear that?" I nodded slowly, my hand instinctively tightening around the poker by the stove. "Stay here," I said, my voice low. I moved to the window and peered out, my heart pounding. At first, I saw nothing but the dark outline of the trees and the shimmering frost on the ground. But then, just for a split second, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows. Someone was out there, watching. I turned back to the woman, my pulse racing. "Pack whatever you have," I said. "We're leaving. Now." Her eyes filled with fear, but she nodded without question. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere they won't think to look," I said, already grabbing my coat. I had no idea where that was, but one thing was certain. This cabin was no longer safe. I threw the door open, my breath visible in the frigid air as I scanned the tree line. Whoever was out there had vanished into the shadows, but my instincts were screaming that they wouldn't be gone for long. We had to move now. "Get your coat," I told the woman, my voice sharper than I intended. "And grab whatever you need for your daughter." She nodded quickly, pulling her daughter close. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady as she bundled the little girl in layers of blankets. The child stirred, blinking groggily. "Mama," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay, baby," the mother said, forcing a smile. "We're going on a little adventure." I waited by the door, my eyes darting between the woods and the winding path that led back to the village. I didn't have much, but I grabbed a flashlight and an old hunting knife from a drawer near the stove. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. "Ready?" I asked, glancing back at them. The mother nodded, clutching her daughter protectively. "Where are we going?" "Someplace safer than here," I said, leading them outside. The night wrapped around us like a cold, suffocating blanket. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of the sea. My boat bobbed gently in the distance, barely visible in the moonlight. It was our only chance. "We'll take the boat," I said. "There's a small island about 10 miles from here. No one lives there anymore. We can hide out until we figure out what to do next." The woman hesitated, glancing at the dark water. "Are you sure it's safe?" "Safe," I repeated, giving her a grim smile. "No, but it's better than waiting here for whoever's out there to come back." Without another word, we made our way down to the dock. The wooden planks creaked beneath our feet, each step feeling louder than it should. I helped them onto the boat, then fired up the engine. The Lucky Star groaned in protest, but she came to life with a rumble, cutting through the still water as we left the shore behind. For a while, the only sound was the hum of the engine and the gentle slap of waves against the hull. The woman sat quietly, holding her daughter close, her eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. "You never told me your name," I said, keeping my eyes on the water. She glanced at me, surprised. "It's Sophia," she said softly. "And this is Lily." "Nice to meet you, Sophia," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "I'm Jake." She gave me a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." I nodded, turning back to the wheel. "Just hold on. We'll be there soon." But just as the tension in my chest started to ease, I caught something in the distance, a faint light, bobbing in the darkness. Another boat, and it was heading straight for us. The light grew brighter, cutting a jagged path across the dark water. My stomach twisted into knots. Whoever was on that boat wasn't out for a midnight cruise. They were looking for us. Sophia noticed it too. Her grip tightened on Lily, her voice trembling. "Jake, they're coming, aren't they?" I didn't answer. My focus locked on the approaching boat, my pulse hammering in my ears. There was no time to panic. "Hold on tight," I said, yanking the throttle and pushing the Lucky Star to her limits. The engine roared as we surged forward, the cold wind biting at my face. The waves slapped against the hull, spraying icy water into the air, but I didn't dare slow down. The other boat picked up speed, the hum of its engine growing louder, closer. A spotlight flickered on, sweeping across the water like a predator searching for prey. It landed on us, bathing the boat in harsh, white light. "Jake!" Sophia cried, her voice sharp with fear. "I see it," I growled, steering hard to the right, the boat tilting dangerously as we skimmed the edge of a wave. Stay low and keep Lily covered. Sophia ducked down, holding Lily close as the spotlight danced across the boat again. My heart was racing so fast, I could barely breathe. This wasn't a chase anymore. It was a hunt. The other boat drew closer, its engine roaring like a beast. I glanced over my shoulder and caught a glimpse of two men on board, their silhouettes dark and menacing. One of them pointed toward us, shouting something I couldn't make out over the wind and waves. "Not today," I muttered, clenching my jaw. I turned sharply toward the deeper water, away from the safety of the shoreline. It was a risk. These waters were rough and unpredictable at night, but it was the only way to lose them. The Lucky Star groaned beneath me, struggling against the swells, but I held her steady, praying she'd hold together just a little longer. The spotlight swept past us again, missing by inches. Then, the unmistakable crack of a gunshot rang out, echoing across the water. Sophia screamed, clutching Lily tighter as I whipped the boat into another sharp turn, trying to make us a harder target. My heart leapt into my throat. "They're shooting at us," Sophia shouted. "Yeah, I noticed," I yelled back, my voice thick with adrenaline. The second shot splintered the wooden railing just a few feet from where Sophia was crouched. I felt a surge of panic, but it only made me push the boat harder. The shoreline was a blur now, but up ahead, barely visible in the moonlight, I spotted a narrow channel between two rocky cliffs. It's a gamble, I thought. If the water was too shallow, we'd run aground. But if I could just make it through. "Hold on," I shouted, steering toward the channel. The rocks loomed dangerously close, but I didn't slow down. The boat groaned and scraped against the shallows, sending a shower of sparks into the air. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought we were stuck. But then, with a shuddering lurch, the Lucky Star broke free, shooting into the calm waters on the other side. The other boat hesitated, its engine sputtering as it struggled to follow us through the narrow gap. "They can't make it," I muttered, breathless. "Not without wrecking." Sure enough, the men cut their engine, their spotlight flickering off as they turned back toward open water. I kept going for a few more minutes, just to be sure, before finally easing the throttle and letting the boat drift to a stop. For a moment, the only sound was the lapping of the waves and the ragged sound of our breathing. We lost them," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling with relief. "Yeah," I said, wiping the sweat from my brow. "For now." I looked at her, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear, and then at Lily, who had fallen back into an uneasy sleep in her arms. This was no ordinary pursuit. These people weren't just trying to scare them. They were out for blood. I kept the boat moving slowly through the calm waters, steering toward the island I'd mentioned earlier. It was nothing more than a forgotten strip of land, a rocky shore surrounded by thick woods. Not exactly paradise, but it was isolated, perfect for hiding. Sophia sat silently, rocking Lily in her arms. The little girl was pale, her lips trembling in her sleep. I could see the worry written all over Sophia's face. "You'll be safe here for now," I said as we neared the island. "It's not much, but no one's gonna find you out here." Sophia gave a weak nod. "Thank you, Jake. I don't know how we'll ever repay you." I killed the engine and guided the boat toward a small dock that looked like it hadn't seen a visitor in years. The boards creaked underfoot as I helped them ashore, my eyes scanning the dark trees. The island felt heavy with silence, the kind that made your skin crawl. I'd spent a few nights out here over the years when I needed to get away, but this time it felt different. This time, I wasn't alone. "Let's head to the cabin," I said, leading them up the rocky path. The cabin sat at the edge of a small clearing, weathered but sturdy. I pushed the door open and flicked on a lantern, casting a warm glow over the rough wooden interior. "It's not fancy," I said, setting down my bag, "but it's safe. You can rest here for a while." Sophia gently laid Lily down on the old couch, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Is there a phone?" she asked. I shook my head. "No cell service out here. It's part of what makes it a good hiding spot." Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment, I saw just how tired she was, how much weight she was carrying on those thin shoulders. "You should rest," I said. "I'll keep watch." She opened her mouth to protest, but exhaustion won. "Thank you," she whispered again before sinking into the chair beside Lily. As they slept, I sat by the window, watching the trees for any sign of movement. The night dragged on, my thoughts spinning in endless circles. Who were these people chasing Sophia and Lily? Why was the little girl so important to them? I didn't have answers, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let anything happen to them. Not while they were under my roof. Morning came slowly, the first light filtering through the thick canopy above. Sophia stirred, blinking at the sunlight streaming through the window. "Good morning," I said, handing her a cup of water. "How's Lily?" "Better," she said with a tired smile. "Still weak, but she's warm now. That's what matters." I nodded, glancing toward the window. "We should talk about what comes next." Sophia's expression darkened. "I know," she said quietly, "but I don't even know where to start." "How about you tell me who those men are?" I said gently. "And why they're after you." Sophia hesitated, her hands tightening around the cup. "They're not just after me," she said. "They're after Lily. She's more valuable than you can imagine." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Her father. He's a powerful man. He doesn't know she exists, but if he did, it would change everything." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. "Who is he?" Sophia took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine. "He's one of the wealthiest men in the country. A billionaire named Richard Stanton." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Even out here in this forgotten corner of the world, I knew that name. Stanton was a household name, a real estate mogul with a reputation for ruthlessness. "And you're saying Lily is his daughter?" I asked, struggling to process it. "Yes," Sophia said, "and there are people who want to use her to get to him." The cabin felt smaller with the weight of her words hanging in the air. "Does he know?" I asked. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I left before he found out I was pregnant. I thought we'd be safe if we disappeared. But someone must have found out, and now they want her, for leverage." The pieces were falling into place, but they painted a grim picture. "So, these people, they're trying to kidnap her?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "They won't stop until they have her. And if they can't use her, they'll make sure she can't be used by anyone else." A chill ran down my spine. "Then we'll just have to make sure they don't find her." We spent the next few hours planning our next move. Staying on the island would buy us time, but it wasn't a long-term solution. "I need to get in touch with someone I trust," Sophia said. "Someone who can help us disappear for good. Do you have someone in mind?" She nodded. "An old friend. She's helped me before. If we can reach her, she'll know what to do." "Then that's our next step," I said. "We'll leave at dusk. The less attention we draw, the better." As the sun dipped below the horizon, we packed what little we had and headed back to the boat. The water was calm, but my nerves were anything but. Sophia sat beside me, her hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. "We'll make it," she said, as if trying to convince herself as much as me. "We will," I said, gripping the wheel. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The people hunting Sophia and Lily weren't going to give up easily. And if they found us again, I'd be ready. No matter what it took, I was going to protect them.